Welcome back. So this is the first lecture on the chapter on middle child. This, I must acknowledge, is a chapter that I have not covered in previous semesters, partly because it's not an incredibly unique time. In other words, it's an expansion of lots of others. It's not like infancy or adolescence. But I elected to cover it this semester, partly because I can, but also several of you out there in Zoom classroom have children of this age, so I thought you might find it interesting. But this middle childhood period is the one between 5 and 11 or 12. So it's basically school age. It's like elementary school up until you get to puberty. And then what's distinctive about adolescence is adolescence begins at age 12, and that's when the body starts to sexually mature. So this is that period in between the sexual maturity, which, if you have these children or you remember it, kind of an awkward stage, okay, but there's a lot going on. So I'm going to break the lectures down into the first half. We'll cover the physical and the cognitive, and then we'll move on to the social and emotional. So you've got a lot of physical changes happening, a lot of growth. This is the kids about age 10. They're somewhere between 80 and 90 pounds. Girls are slightly heavier than boys. Kids are growing about 2 inches a year. That's actually quite a bit if you think about it. It could be like, 10 inches. And kids today weigh more than they did when I was 10 years old, in 1980. Some of the variations, so boys have a little bit more muscle, girls have a little bit more fat. But there's also some cross racial group variations. Your textbook suggests that Black girls have actually more muscle and more dense bones than do white or brown girls. So there is some variation. Kids still need a lot of sleep. They still need anywhere between 9 and 10 hours. So that means if they're getting up at 7 o'clock to go to school, they need to be going to bed no later than 9, right? So my kids never went to bed that early. There's a lot of brain development that's happening specifically. And so what I've tried to do here is I've tried to bold things that are likely to show up on quizzes and such. Specifically, there's more gray matter and it's becoming more white matter. And the significance of that is that it speeds up processing. So what that is it's the myelinization or in the synaptic pruning. So somewhere before this period, the brain has become more dense, there's more synaptic connections, and then through experience, these synapses are becoming, they are potentiating or they're becoming pruned. So synapses that aren't being used are dying, and what the result is that processing is faster and children can begin to think more complexly, right? Because those connections that aren't being used are not taking up time and space. And this is happening a little bit quicker for girls. So the thickness of these various cortexes is happening more quickly for girls. We begin to see a shift in how children play. There is a brief mention of recess in your textbook. One of the things that sociologists have observed is that there are fewer and fewer recesses. And this is resulting in another problem that we'll talk about in a couple other slides, and that is childhood obesity is one of the explanations. But play has become more gender segregated, so girls are playing with girls more, and it's less informal, spontaneous. The textbook talks about jump rope and things like this. It's still a time of what's referred to as rough and tumble play. So I guess that would be just, I don't know, wrestling? I don't know, but not so much, and even less for girls than for boys. Okay, so about a third of American children between the ages of 2 and 19 at this point are officially obese or overweight. And this is ironically the same time where we have this increase in body image. And children, if they're playing with the language your textbook uses is something like unrealistic dolls like Barbie. Even though Barbie is better than she was, there are now some hippier, more body variety conscious Barbie dolls. But we have this increase in body image. So I've read statistics that girls as early as 10 and 11 begin to start dieting. And nutritionists would argue that's not good. But at the same time, you have this contrast with this is also when kids begin to show signs of obesity, and they can develop the same problems that adults have, like high blood pressure, otherwise known as hypertension, and type 1 or type 2 diabetes. What was the statistic that says that diabetes is the most common disease in school-age kids? Now, there is a difference between type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is when you are insulin dependent, which means your body either doesn't produce insulin or it doesn't produce enough insulin. Type 2 is insulin resistant, and that is when your body produces insulin, but it can't use it. Okay, and it used to be thought that type 1 was something you were born with and type 2 was a condition. It is type 2 that's more common in children. So also during this period, we have a whole lot of what are called acute medical conditions. And you can kind of remember that by thinking cute, cute is small. So acute medical conditions, and these are like the statistic is something like 6 to 7 flus or colds or viruses over the course of a year. I think about, first graders and second graders, and they always do seem to have a runny nose. Unfortunately, they bring this home to their parents. Chronic conditions are conditions that are defined as 3 or more months. So you have asthma and diabetes are considered 2 really common chronic conditions of children of this age. Asthma diagnoses has doubled since the 1980s. And what I found interesting is it suggests that this is more common, a diagnosis is more common for boys than girls. I thought that was interesting because my girl has an asthma diagnosis. And of course, there's a whole variety of potential explanations. You hear things like that it's in the environment. Your textbook doesn't mention maternal smoking, but it does mention cigarette smoking in the environment. I've heard references to, nor is there a discussion about allergies. Allergies are often thought of to be like an environmental cause because our environments are too clean. But that's been also an explanation. The number 1 cause of death in this kid in this age range is accidents, and their textbook discusses trampolines and bicycle helmets. So that's why I put this little picture of bicycle helmets. Apparently, the American Pediatric Association has noted here, it says right here, the AAP committee on sports medicine and fitness has said that parents should not buy trampolines. I did not know that. I had a trampoline in my backyard for my kids. They are very dangerous, of course. Okay, so I'm going to stop here because talk more about cognitive advances, which is a bit more kind of lengthy discussion in the next video.